en leuk dat je luistert naar een nieuwe aflevering van F1 Spoiler Alert. En niet zomaar een aflevering, maar een heuse bonusaflevering. Nou, bonusafleveringen, die hebben we niet zo vaak. En als we ze wel hebben, dan hebben we vaak hele leuke gasten. Althans, dat vind ik. Dat vind ik zeker deze keer, want dit keer is namelijk niemand minder de gast dan Lee Mather. Hij is de Senior Creative Director van de populaire F1 games. Deze week verschenen de nieuwste editie van die games, F1 24, op je favoriete console of op de PC. En ondanks het feit dat dat natuurlijk een hectische periode is voor Lee en zijn team, nam hij toch nog even de tijd om ons uitgebreid te woord te staan over die nieuwe game, over de nieuwe verbeteringen aan de game en wat hij zoal verwacht van het aankomende kampioenschap. Benieuwd naar het gesprek met Lee? Blijf dan vooral even luisteren. Let wel, het gesprek met Lee is natuurlijk in het Engels. Zijn Nederlands is helaas niet wat het hoort te zijn, maar laat dat je vooral niet tegenhouden. Luister vooral even lekker mee mee, terwijl we bijkletsen met niemand minder dan Lee Mather van EA Sports /Codemasters. So welcome, Lee, and thank you for sitting out that Dutch introduction with me. As I just mentioned to our Dutch audience, I'm very thankful that you took the time out of your busy schedule to have a quick chat with us on the new F1 24 game. But before we dive into the game, I'm just very curious, how are you experiencing the F1 season so far? I mean, it's quite the roller coaster ride, isn't it?
Oh, it's awesome now, isn't it? I think the start to the season was looking like it was going to be another world record-breaking season for Max, but both Ferrari and McLaren have really made significant progress. And I was lucky enough to be out in Miami to see Lando take his victory as well, which was something really special. And of course, I mean, you can't be angry at Charles Leclerc winning his home Grand Prix. I mean, that's just beautiful for everyone involved. Whether you're a Charles fan or not, that is really something quite special.
Yeah, we did see some redemption this season, am I right? I mean, we've seen Norris win his first Grand Prix. Everybody's glad that Charles Leclerc finally got Monaco off his to-do list as his home Grand Prix victory came in this weekend. And then also, I mean, I think everybody was rooting for Carlos Sainz picking up that victory as well, right?
Yeah, I can't wait to see where Carlos goes next as well.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a crazy, silly season this year, I think. I'm really looking forward to that one as well. Diving into the game this year, F1 24 is coming out this week. If I've counted correctly, you guys have been involved in 14 iterations, and you as well as a person, am I right?
Yeah, I've worked on every one since 2010.
That is so fascinating. It's so much time. What would you say is the biggest step that you made in producing the game? The biggest advancement in technology or gameplay or just overall?
Ooh, there's been a few sort of key moments along the way for me. I think the generational change, obviously, from in 2015 when we moved into the higher resolution, higher frame rate sort of ability on consoles. But I mean, establishing the series in 2010 was phenomenal. That was a really big thing for us. The shift to the new generation of consoles in 2015 was really exciting because that gave us the opportunity in 16 to bring in the driver career, which has been a huge part of the series ever since. Obviously, this year being the second time we've done a really major refresh of the driver career. 2020 was big because we did My Team. 21 with Breaking Point. There's so many big features that we've brought in along the way that we've kept the authenticity, we've followed the sport, but also we've brought in some really cool and exciting moments. I mean, that's just a small number of them.
I can only imagine the type of roller coaster ride each year of development can be. But just looking at this specific year, I mean, no big changes in the drivers lineup. All the drivers stayed at the same teams. No new circuits on the calendar. Well, I mean, China is back, but that's a circuit that you already had rendered in previous editions. So does that make development a little bit easier for you guys? Or is each year a new complete overhaul of the complete game?
It's always a major overhaul. And if there's a particular area that a particular part of the team doesn't need to do something new on, then we go back and we'll start to refresh areas that we can take advantage of there. So, for example, you mentioned no new circuits this year, but that's given us the opportunity to completely rebuild both Spa and Silverstone and update Jeddah and Losail as well. So that team will always be busy. And then when it comes to the character team, for example, no new drivers, but it's given us the opportunity to go back and rescan all of the drivers and get far higher quality heads. So there's always plenty of work to be done, whether the sport's changed or not.
So there's no way you and your team can get complacent in any kind of form?
No, there's always something we can be doing to further the game and move it forward.
So looking at F1 24, one of the most mentioned and touted updates for this year is probably the handling system. And I've already experienced it myself with testing the game in the last few days. Can Could you explain a little bit to us what this new handling system exactly means?
Yeah, so we wanted to set ourselves up for the long term, make some changes to the fundamentals at the core of the model, and it was to resolve several things that the community have fed back to us over the years. That the behaviour on the curbs was sometimes a little unpredictable, that traction wasn't as effective as people believed it should be, and that the car sometimes had more of a tendency to understeer, in that the nose wanted to push wide in the corners. So we looked at what we were lacking in our physics model and what we could make use of, long term, and we wanted to add in obviously the ability to have a better suspension model. So that's why we built suspension kinematics into it, which allows for better weight transfer. So anti-dive and anti-squat when the car accelerates or the car brakes. It's a more stable platform. We also wanted to do work on the aero as well, because that plays such a huge part in the sport. And we wanted the chassis control to have a bigger impact on the aero. So obviously how the ride height of the car impacts the aero and the drag. We also did work on the tyre model as well, making significant changes there to not only the wear model, but also the temperature model. And all of these things, plus a few other bits and pieces that we've done in there, have given us that next step forward in our handling model. And then to add further player agency as well, we also wanted to do something with the ERS system. So we wanted the energy recovery system to have more for the player to control there. And already I've just been doing some great racing today and seeing the AI when they're starting to derate and their battery's charging, and you think, I'm going to chase them down now, or you risk turning up the ERS a little bit and you use all your battery and then you're a sitting duck. The ebb and flow of the race is so exciting because of the impact the ERS can have.
I mean, just listening to you summing up all those changes, especially on the aero part, it makes me wonder. I think Adrian Newey has a new job for next year.
Somebody's asked if we can try and poach Adrian Newey.
Yeah, why not? You should do it.
I'm sure he'd be just as impactful here as he is in real life. He's obviously incredibly skilled.
So there are also new settings for the power unit in the F124 game. There were already a lot of tweaks and settings and options in the previous iterations of the game, but these new power unit settings are especially powerful for players, right?
Yeah, so very much. Previously, we limited the amount of options that the player had during a race. So they had more options with a power unit during practice and qualifying. But now during the race, you can, if you really want to, turn that engine right up. But it's obviously at the detriment of the amount of charge you've got. The system is also more effective in how it charges and discharges. So there's a lot more activity there for the player to take part in. And it really does mix the racing up beautifully.
Looking at all those options, and not just the new ones, but also the previous tweaks and setups and things that we could apply to the car. I mean, balancing between the more casual players, maybe using a controller as well, and the more sim-forwarded thinking fans, players that use the steering wheel and pedals, it must be quite the tightrope to thread. Are you afraid that some of the new settings and the new technologies that you apply in the game will make the learning curve too steep for new players?
I don't believe so. I think we always set out to build a very authentic model from the ground up, and then we layer in things that make the game accessible to players who play through different ways and different controller types. So myself, I always generally play on a wheel and pedals, and I play everything at the most difficult. But then when I play on a controller, just for the ease of my fingers, I tend to leave the gearbox as auto. I just find that a little bit easier. And then for players, for example, who do need extra assistance, we've obviously got a suite of assists, as you can imagine. So traction control, anti-lock brakes, the kind of standard things that you have in a racing title. But we go further than that. So for players who, for example, don't understand what the drag reduction system is and how they would want to trigger that, there's an automatic option for drag reduction. For the ERS, for players who don't want to go through the intricacies of managing it, we can have that set to auto as well. So the game can handle some of the really most complicated things. So essentially, if the experience you're looking for is to be able to drive one of the coolest cars on one of the coolest tracks, you can have that. If you want to experience that as a full F1 experience to the depths that we do create, you can have that experience also.
For the first time ever, F124 will allow players to play as real drivers in their career mode. What's the biggest way this will change their experience in that career mode compared to previous years?
Yeah, I think the shift for us doing that this year was very much we'd never done it before. We, as you mentioned yourself when we were chatting earlier, that the fan base is now very different in Formula One. People are really driven by the drivers themselves. The driver personalities are allowed to be out there more readily through socials. So players really do follow the drivers, and what better than to drive as your hero? And we saw that as a great grounding for also some of the progression and the stats as well. So the statistics of your driver are obviously important, and you start with the stats of that real life driver. You start out with their achievements in their careers, their accolades, and you build upon those as well. And you start out with a level of recognition within the paddock, which is tied to that driver as well. So again, when you go into contract talks, that level of recognition will play a part in the secret meetings when you're negotiating either a better deal with your current team or a move to another team. So it brings in a totally different dimension. If you start as yourself, for example, you've got none of those things. You start from scratch. So you're building up from, no accolades, no real strong driver stats. You've not turned a wheel yet. And then, of course, the opportunity as well to take the icons is something that we just thought was really fun because, they're not in the sport anymore, but their statistics are now frozen in time. But as a player, you can continue their career journeys within the game.
Yeah, I already mentioned beforehand, I've been testing the game for the past few weeks. And to take Mika Hakkinen to his 2024 Monaco victory was quite a satisfying experience, I can tell you that.
Very cool.
So you already mentioned the recognition system. This is a new feature also in the game. But this feature is tied into all sorts of the career mode, am I right?
It is, yes. Yeah, we always try and look for something that's really nice and clear to the player that gives them an idea of how they're perceived within the paddock and how their career is progressing. And recognition obviously has a lot of weight in the game. So as I mentioned, it plays into the contract system significantly. It also ties into R&D as well quite significantly, especially now that you'll be competing with your teammate to get the lead on the research and development for your team. So you don't want your teammate to be getting ahead of you because they'll start to spend the business, the currency that the team has on the upgrades that they think are important and not necessarily the ones that you want to target yourself.
Also new in career mode for this year is the so-called challenge career. Could you explain a little bit to us what challenge career exactly is and what players can expect from it?
Yeah, so challenge career, we knew when we were building the new driver career that we wanted to do something where players could feel more connected to other players, and we wanted to give them an experience that was consistent and gave them the ability to rate themselves against their peers. So challenge career is essentially all of the components that make the driver career in an asynchronous offline game mode with scoring. So we build the scenario, we build the season that we want you to play, we'll set up which driver, which team, level of R&D, those things, and you will play amongst players asynchronously in a leaderboard structure. It's chapter driven, so there'll be a number of chapters, then we'll close those off, launch some new chapters, and you'll play that entire series through. It was kind of inspired by, we were talking about how when you play like Halo, for example, you'll see somebody who's played a level on Legendary and you'll see the score that they got for that level. It's like, well, that's a really nice idea to take, that's an asynchronous game mode. The players playing on their own, but they're connected to other players who are having the same experience. And we wanted to create something quite similar to that in Formula One. And that's what Challenge Career was all about.
We've gained the challenge career, which I found a very fun addition as well. Could we see it as the sort of replacement for the story mode that we used to have in the F1 games?
I think it caters to a different audience. I think the story mode obviously is supported by really cool cinematics, very strong character-driven stories. So I think they both have a place within the F1 world, definitely.
So for 2024, F1 World returns as the sort of multiplayer hub, gathering all the multiplayer features that the game offers. One of the new features in this F1 World is the Fan Zone Championship. What can you tell us about this new feature and how do you think it's going to be a central part of the multiplayer experience?
Yes. So what we wanted to do there was, again, talking about how players are now so engaged with the drivers. We wanted to give them the opportunity to really showcase who their favorite driver and who their favorite team is. So we took F1 World as the abstract space in the game where we can create new experiences. We've rebalanced F1 World, so the progression's now different in F1 World as well. But we wanted to bring in the ability for players to showcase their favorite driver, their favorite team. So once you've done the intro to F1 World, you'll be asked who your favorite driver and who your favorite team is. You'll make that selection and it will be showcased as you play then through any part of the online experience. So it'll be shown against your name, who your favorite driver is or who your favorite team is. You pick which one. You'll then play events within F1 World. Whatever you do, time trial, Grand Prix, events themselves, multiplayer, all of those things will score you fan zone points. And what you want to do is contribute to your fan zone. So if I'm in the Lewis fan zone, I want to see that fan zone become the most successful out of all of the driver fan zones, come out on top, win the fan zone championship, get me the additional prizes, showcase my driver license in gold, get me the gold expression label next to my name. So it's really about really letting players just showcase who they like and then coming together naturally through that competition element and also that connection. I'll go into my fan zone space and I'll see other players in there. I'll be like, this is cool. They've chosen Lewis as well. They must be Lewis fans. And then we might race together. We might start to do some league racing together, for example. It's a good way to bring people together within the game in quite a passive way and start to hopefully build some relationships and more community within the game.
Yeah, one of the reasons I think the fan zone championship is done so well is because you can choose between a driver and a team separately. So it's not just that you pick Max Verstappen and Red Bull or Orlando Norris and McLaren or Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, but you can also pick, for instance, if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan, Lewis Hamilton as a driver and Ferrari as a team. So you can already get used to that setup for next year.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's one of those things where I always thought I always used to be a fan of a team. For most of my life, I've always been fans of specific teams, and then in more recent years, mainly since Lewis came along, I've realised that the team, it means a lot to me, but I follow the driver even more so. And I think it probably goes back to sort of thinking like Williams for me has always been a big team in my life because of Nigel Mansell more than anything really. And then now when Nigel went to Ferrari, it's like, well, Ferrari are ace as well. And then, Lewis, when Lewis moved from McLaren, who've been a massive team again for me, to Mercedes, I thought, well, I don't really have any interest in Mercedes, but I now find that I do because the Lewis effect of that gives you that interest. And again, with Ferrari, I love Ferrari, but I wouldn't say I'm the world's biggest Ferrari fan, but to see one of my favorite drivers go there energizes my interest in Ferrari.
Circling back to the start of our talk, we've been discussing the progress that has been made with F1 24, but also the big steps that you and your team have been making in the last 14 years, developing the whole F1 franchise. I think this year with new drivers on board radios and the driver selection in the career mode and so much more, all the things that we've discussed, big steps have been made. But what's the one thing that's still on the top of Lee Mather's list of holy grails to pursue in racing games?
Ooh, it's a really difficult question that we've done so much, but I think what you'll probably see is the evolution of what we're doing in F1 world and the ability to connect people. So I think that's notoriously difficult in a racing game because they're inherently competitive. And I think long term, bringing players together to share in experiences, I think is a really important thing in all gaming. It's one of the more challenging areas in racing titles because, as I say, it's a competitive space. But I think that's something that I certainly have a lot of interest in for the future still.
Good stuff, good stuff. Just wrapping up, Lee, because I know you're a very busy man in a very busy week for you guys. Any predictions for Canada coming up next race weekend?
Oh, it's difficult. So you'll probably have noticed in the game we've got the fan zone, we've got the fan vote, and the question in the fan vote already is which team's going to score more points, Ferrari or McLaren, and it's a really difficult one. I've picked McLaren because I think both Lando and Oscar are absolutely flying at the moment. But it could go either way. But yeah, I think Max will probably take it, but I think it's going to be very close. Those three now, the three teams are right up there together.
All right. And since we're already predicting, who's your 2024 world champion?
I think I'd still be crazy to go against Max. I still think he'll edge it out, but I think it's going to be a lot closer. I can see the rest of this season just being an absolute nail biter. I think it really is going to be incredible.
Good for the games, good for the entertainment, and good for the fans.
Yeah, it's good for everyone, good for the game, but definitely good for fans.
All right. Well, thank you so much once again, Lee, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and talk with us. I know you guys have a busy week ahead. The F1 24 Championship Edition launched earlier this week. The Standard Edition is coming out this Friday, so I know you have a crazy lot of things to do. So thank you once again for taking the time and have a chat with us. And I wish you the best of luck with the launch of the game.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really great to talk to you.
En zo kwam er een einde aan mijn gesprek met Lee Mather. Zoals jullie kunnen hebben horen in de podcast is de F1 24 game vanaf deze week overal beschikbaar. Vanaf aanstaande vrijdag 31 mei is hij ook beschikbaar in de standaard editie voor je PC of favoriete console. Dus ga dat zeker even checken. En daarmee komt er ook een einde aan deze bonusaflevering van F1 Spoiler Alert. Gelukkig zijn we alweer heel snel bij jullie terug met een reguliere uitzending rondom de GP van Canada. Dus heel lang hoef je niet op ons te wachten. Mocht je in de tussentijd toch nog je Formule 1 fix willen halen ergens, word dan zeker even lid van onze F1 Telegram chat, waar er druk gediscussieerd wordt over Formule 1 en alles daaromheen. Voor nu, bedankt voor het luisteren en tot de volgende aflevering van F1 Spoiler Alert.